Hello, welcome to this session. This is session 3 of Unit 5. We are still looking at taxation and government expenditure in Ghana. We are focused on the taxation bit. So, in this session, we are looking at the incidence of taxation, who bears the burden of taxation in a transaction. Right. So, by the end of this session, we will be able to define the incidence of taxation. We'll also be able to distinguish between statutory incidence and incidence of taxation and economic incidence of taxation. And finally, we would be able to explain why incidence of taxation does not depend on who actually collect the tax on behalf of the government, but rather on the relative elasticity of demand and supply. Right. So let's then look at what incidence of taxation is. Right. We said incidence of taxation is basically I'm talking about who bears the burden of tax whenever there is a tax on anything, right? So I'm not sure any business will just want to sit there and then consume whatever taxation that they are being charged without actually um, escalating these taxes to the buyers of their product, right? So remember clearly when there was the introduction of the communication taxes, and what happened was that the tariffs of these telcos increase as well. So you could see that the tariffs of the core charges and also the data charges increase, right? So that means the burden of the CIT or the communication taxes which was introduced was passed on from the telcos to we the service users, right? So that's basically how incidence of taxation works. Now we can define the incidence of taxation in two forms, right? That's the statutory incidence and then the economic incidence per law or per whatever tax laws exist. The person who's supposed to bear the burden of these taxes or who's supposed to pay these taxes is the seller, right? So whenever the seller whenever there's a tax, the seller is the one who's supposed to pay the taxes on this particular goods, right? But then who actually bears the that burden is whom we term as the economic incidence, right? So the statutory is saying that normally on the seller is the one who is legally mandated to collect the taxes on behalf of what the government. That's the statutory incident. It is the responsibility of the seller to do that. But then economic incident indicates who actually pay the taxes, right? The consumer, the seller, or both the consumer and the seller, right? So the debate of who actually pays and who is paying mostly depends on some economic factors, right? This leads us to the concept of elasticity, right? Who bears the burden of taxes, right? So sellers will mostly consider the nature of their goods before transferring these taxes, right? Now these telcos, once again, the thing is that whatever you do, we are going to use their network, so they 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 would actually transfer the burden of 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 these taxes to you, because we just have 3 or 4 telcos running in this country. So whatever you do, you use them, so they would have to these tax burdens always come back to us, right? So elasticity is just the responsive of a change in demand or supply as a result of the changes in price or income or any other determinant of demand and supply. So how demand changes when there is a change in any of the factors that affect demand, like prices, um like taste, like a whole other factors, right? So what will happen to demand if this thing changes, right? Now when there is tax, it it affects what prices, right? Now the seller is going to incur more because that is going to affect what supply, and if supply is being affected, meaning price, there will be a movement in supply and order. So that's going to cause a change in demand and order, right? So we are saying these two types of elasticity are the ones that determine how tax burdens are shared, or who is going to bear the tax burden and who is not going to bear the burden, right? So we are saying a demand can be either elastic or inelastic, right? Now elastic demand is a form of demand which actually occurs when a change in price of a commodity will lead to a greater change in the demand for that commodity. So assuming that prices of that particular commodity increases by 1 cedi, and then the demand for the commodity is falling for about say 50 cedis, then the good is said to be what? Inelastic. So we are saying any good for which, if there is a percentage change in price, will lead to a greater percentage change in demand, that particular good can be termed as elastic. And then inelastic, on the other hand, we are saying that when a change in price leads to a less proportionate change in what? The quantity demanded, then there is an inelastic demand. So when a good when there is an increase in price for, let's say, 5 cedi, and then the quantity demand falls by just 1 cedi, then we are saying this particular good is inelastic, right? So I keep saying, like, you keep hearing that a fall in demand, sorry, an increase in price and a fall in demand, right? That's because the demand is demand, that's price and quantity, has some negative relationship, right? There is an inverse relationship between price and quantity demand. We are saying if price is to increase, quantity demand falls, and if price falls, quantity demand what? Increases. Okay, so based on this analogy, let's discuss, or let's look at how this particular elasticities affect the tax incidence in Ghana, right? So we have these two equilibrium curves, right? So with the first one, we are saying the good there is elastic, right, which we explained to be that when there is an increase in price, or when there is a change in price, there is a larger proportionate change in quantity demanded. So we could see clearly that these are demand, the demand curve. Let me highlight it. So this is the demand curve, right? And then this is the first supply curve, right? So at this instance, we are saying this is the equilibrium. So at the demand of at this point, at this demand curve, right, the buyer is willing to buy at 3.5, and then there's the quantity demanded at that point is what? 100. But then let's assume a situation whereby there has been an increase in taxes, right? We are saying if there's an increase in taxes, the supply curve would have to move up, right? If the supply curve increases, right, what's happening is that there is a sharp fall in what? In quantity demanded, right? Remember, there was just a 0.3 increase in demand, in price, right? That 0.3 increase in price is causing 10 fall in what? In quantity demanded. So in this situation, we are saying that the seller, right, who wouldn't want to burden or lose more of its customers, is going to bear most of what? The tax burden, right? In this other curve, where we have another demand curve, and then this a supply curve. Here we are saying the commodity is what? Inelastic. That is, a change in price leads to what? A smaller change in what? Quantity demanded, right? So here we could see clearly that when there was an increase in the price from 3.5 to 4.3, which is more of an 80 pesos increase, the quantity demanded, right, the quantity demanded for that particular commodity fell by 10, right? So comparing this particular one to the elastic commodity, we see that here the seller would want to share the tax burden with the buyer, right? Because here, even if the price increases very much, the buyer is the change in the quantity demanded isn't that much, right? And for that reason, the buyer would always, sorry, the seller would always want to share the tax burden with the buyers, right? So that's basically how elasticity of a commodity affects the tax incidence. So when the good is elastic and the seller sees that he's going to lose a chunk of its consumers, he would want to bear a larger portion of the tax, or in some situation bear all the taxes. But in a situation whereby the good is inelastic, right, where the buyer sees that he will not lose a whole lot of its consumer, when when it increases the price, he may bear a little or no portion of the tax burden and shift all the tax burden onto the consumer, since he's going to make enough revenue to cater for the taxes after some of these consumers leave. Right. So that's basically how tax incidence works. So in this session, we've just looked at tax incidence and then its effects on the demand and supply. Right. So we are done with this session, and let's kindly take some few minutes to recap what we've done in this session. If you need any clarity, or if there is anything that you do not understand, kindly refer back to that portion of the slide, or refer to the study manual for a clearer understanding.